Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Olympics finally being over, at least for basketball. The U.S. is victorious, but who else got to show out? And then we're going to discuss what patriotism really means to Kevin Durant. So welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with my co-host Will Jones and our special guest Wes from the Six Man YouTube channel. Wes, thank you for coming on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited about this. I was upset, but then I got cheered up because we got Six Man on the show.
Why were you upset, Will?
I mean, you know why I was upset.
We'll discuss.
Self-explanatory. Check Kevin Durant's Twitter.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are recording right now a couple of hours after the U.S. took on France in the gold medal game in the Olympics. And that game pretty much went as expected. But before we dig into the Olympic Games, we do have a couple of news items. We didn't talk about the fact that Jarrett Allen got a massive extension last week from the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's a 3-year, $91 million extension. And effectively, he's going to be getting about what, say, Hartenstein got from OKC. Just based on how he's being paid, is Jarrett Allen the best non-max or rookie scale center in the NBA?
I would say he is probably, obviously, a good caveat with the non-rookie, because I think Chet and Wemby might be better, probably are better already.
Yeah.
But I'd say outside of the max, outside of those two guys, it'd probably be him and maybe Hartenstein as well. You have to see Hartenstein in a more advanced role, because last year he was playing only 25 minutes a game. We think he can deliver more than he did, but we haven't seen it. Jarrett Allen's been a guy that's consistently given you 15 and 10 and been a good defender. He's a pretty good passer. He's more talented offensively than he gets credit for. He's actually got some skill in the post, and he can post up.
He's got a floater.
Yeah, he's got a floater, hook shots. Yeah. So I think he would be the best. I saw someone on Twitter saying, why would you pay him $30 million when you're paying $45 million to Bam or whatever? It's well, there has to be a middle ground. And $30 million is somewhat the middle ground these days. It's kind of crazy to wrap your head around, but that's the middle ground. And I think, or just above. And I think he's that kind of player.
How do you see the Evan Mobley and the Allen thing going on? Wasn't there questions about their fit throughout the season? And now, I don't know where they're at with that one.
The spacing's a question mark for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I have here what the hell is going on with the Cavs, because it's in a vacuum. This sounds like a great deal. Jarrett Allen, he's a great center. But in the context of a team where you have a quote unquote developing Evan Mobley that is supposed to be playing the 5, but isn't also maybe good at some aspects of that position and not others. I just don't know that they have a direction. I feel like they are Pelicans East. How do you feel about that?
I like that comparison. A lot of talent on paper. A superstar level player. Mitchell's more consistent than Zion, but I'd say Zion he is that level when he's playing, and just talent that just doesn't really fit, but you just hope that the talent will make it work because of how good they are.
Yeah, and it's funny because the Pelicans need a big, and the
Cavs Jarrett Allen was someone I thought would be perfect. Yeah, and Brandon Ingram for the Cavs. That was a proposed trade on social media and stuff.
Next was Lauri Markkanen, right? Lauri Markkanen got the 5-year, $238 million max extension, and he can't be traded now. So the whole idea of the Warriors wanting to complete a trade for Lauri is on hold, at least for this season, it seems.
With how teams are so all out on winning, he's a very good player. And when he's been on the floor, they generally have been good enough to be 500. But that was when they had veterans. If they're playing 6 first-year players and Lauri, he'll still get his numbers and be good, but they're not going to be a top seed. So they could still potentially get a top 5 pick and keep that talent. And he's the kind of guy, when you look at the Pistons or the Hornets or those teams that have supposedly been rebuilding for 5-6 years, they've been looking for this kind of guy, and the Jazz have him. Why would you give him up when he's only 27 and he wants to stay? And you could still theoretically get a top pick as well while he's on the team. It's I would have kept him as well. I think it was the right decision.
I love the idea of Ainge checking what the market value was for him and just
Yeah.
like trying to get the communication going on that. And, there wasn't never any true sign that he was willing to trade him.
I don't think there was anything wrong with keeping him. I guess I'm just surprised that the market value was max money. I think part of the allure of Lauri Markkanen over the last couple of years is just this guy. He's on this amazing contract and he's such a good player. But after the Mikal Bridges trade, like if Ainge looks at that deal where Mikal goes for effectively 5 first-round picks, he doesn't want to take less than that for Lauri. But there's only one other team in the entire league that wants to give up that kind of asset in terms of like draft capital. That would be the Oklahoma City Thunder, which thank goodness they didn't go after.
Yeah, that would have been ridiculous.
I don't know that on a max deal, he's nearly as tradable as he was on his previous deal.
I could see that as well, for sure. I think, though, we have seen teams, they're just willing to give up regardless of the contract. I guess Bradley Beal's the bad example where he got to a point, at one point he was like a valuable asset. Washington kept going until the injuries, the age, the contract, it all added up. I don't think Lauri will get to that level. We haven't seen that. And I think he's so valuable, his shooting and his off-ball ability. I can't see his efficiency dropping. But that is the example of someone holding onto an asset too long, right, when they didn't need to hold on to, and then it ended up backfiring. So I guess that would be the bad example. But we have seen other players that you think might be slightly overpaid, or they still end up going for multiple first-round picks.
Okay, well, Sham's got the scoop on an early look ahead to the NBA schedule, which has not been released in full yet. But on Christmas Day, the Spurs are going to be playing the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. The Timberwolves are going to be playing the Mavericks in Dallas. The Sixers will be playing in Boston. The Lakers at Warriors, always a classic. And then finally, the Nuggets versus the Suns. I was really surprised to see that the Oklahoma City Thunder, who were the 1 seed in the West last year, did not get tapped for a Christmas Day game. Do you guys think that the Thunder got shafted?
I'd say yeah. I mean, they won the 1 seed last year. They are probably going to win it again.
Well, this is not how you responded when we first.
Well, that wasn't the question. The question that you gave me was, did they get shafted? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
But what I said on Twitter was that I love it. I feel like you have to like struggle as a new up and coming team and have like people not like really recognize you as being legit for a little while. And then you get the Christmas game, after a couple seasons. But I think that the Thunder have done enough and have a pretty exciting roster. I mean, Shea is a big name. Like, he's going to bring in viewers. I don't know if you had to like pick them to play someone on here, like who would you sub them out for?
The Spurs being there is maybe like the biggest point of contention, but it's like, I get it. Wemby is a big draw and he's becoming a star. There's an argument between the Thunder and the Wolves. You could say, well, the Wolves made it further in the playoffs last year. I guess it made less sense for the Mavs to play on Christmas last year because they missed the playoffs the year before. And then, Lakers and Warriors are going to be on the Christmas Day slate because it's LeBron, it's Steph, and the Celtics have to be there because you need Eastern Conference teams. The Knicks have to be there because you need Eastern Conference teams. Actually, the West comprises 7 out of the 10 teams on this slate. So it's difficult to make an argument for another Western Conference team.
They really could have done Thunder versus Mavs and then Wolves versus Nuggets.
I like that, yeah.
And then kick the Suns out, but here we are being beholden to KD.
Yeah, I don't mind that idea. That would have worked. I think also, I feel like the Mavs and Thunder have a bit more like of a rivalry than the Timberwolves. I don't know. Maybe that's just from like random Twitter that I see, but it feels like the Mavs and Thunder, there's a bit more kind of tension
because
there.
Because of the Shea versus Luka.
Shea versus Luka, yeah.
You have 2 MVP caliber guys whose fan bases kind of hate each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a major, it's not crazy difference, but it just feels like there's a little bit more heat in that rivalry than the Timberwolves and Mavs.
Yeah, Wolves.
Yeah, so for those of you listening to our podcast right now, please go follow Wes. He makes amazing videos. It's six man YouTube. I'm sure like everyone listening to this probably already knows you, but if there's one person out there who hasn't, please go watch his videos. They're amazing. It'll prove your life and your basketball knowledge infinitely. And let's just start with like your origins and like how you got into basketball and some of your favorite teams and players growing up.
Well, it's not like the craziest origin stories. Is growing up in Australia, the biggest sport I would say is Australian football.
Yeah.
So I played that since I was a kid up until like 19. I only started playing basketball when I got to high school and just kind of messing around. So that was like 13 or so. And then I slowly got more into it, watching it. Jokic was, funnily enough, one of my favorite players. Like from his second year or something in the league, for some reason, I just liked his game. I remember going to school or whatever. No one really even knew much about basketball at school, and I'd be like, "Yeah, Jokic, Millsap, Gary Harris. These guys are they're gonna put the West on notice." And
That's
they're like,
amazing.
who are you talking about?" I'm like, "Just trust me."
This team in
So I don't know
Denver,
why.
Colorado.
Yeah, I don't know why I was like early attached to him. Steph as well, Steph, KD, of course, those guys. But yeah, it was mainly just playing at school and then just starting to watch it more and more. And then as I started to make content, I initially started making some like mixtapes. I realized I couldn't get monetized from that. So I was like, let me try my hand at doing some voiceovers, and slowly but surely built up a bit of an audience. So that's
Yes.
kind of the origins. I don't know if I left anything out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am actually like a huge fan of your YouTube channel. So I was
Thank
really
you.
excited when I saw that you followed me on Twitter. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Six Man. I didn't even realize. I was like, oh, it's Wes. That's cool. Yeah, because over the past, year and a half, as I've dug deeper into my basketball fandom, just finding videos that have this like cool blend of like information and like education about like breaking down certain plays, like what happened with the offense, what happened with the defense in a particular possession, but then merging that with some really cool propaganda for
I'm
Jokic
guilty
in
of that. Yeah,
particular
for the
was
right players. Guilty,
was
guilty
really,
challenge.
yeah. Absolutely you are, and I appreciate that you sort of lean into that
Yeah.
that like infotainment
Mm.
direction that you have for the channel.
I think it somewhat goes back to my origins as well, because I didn't grow up around basketball as much as other people on YouTube. There are people on YouTube that have been watching games, thousands of games for so long. So I know I won't have that level of knowledge. It's just, you can build it up for sure, but it's hard to just replicate that. You have the thinking basketballs of the world, like Hoop Venue and those guys that just know the game inside out. So I try to think that I add as much as I can from an analysis point of view, and then try to blend it in with entertainment. Just knowing that I feel like that's probably my best way of making the videos enjoyable to as many people as possible. So it's not completely casual, but if you're a casual fan or whatever, you could still enjoy it.
Maybe you'll get sick of us like complimenting you because we are huge fans, but like you have like the perfect voice for it. As listeners listening to this episode, you're gonna hear like your
You have
Australian
great
accent,
voice
the
for
voice.
radio.
Listening to that's what
Oh
you
yeah.
have like right like excitement in all your videos, and it's like oh, it's so good. And it's like
Oh
you have
my
such a
gosh.
modest bio on your Twitter channel where you're like sometimes my videos are occasionally good, and it's like yeah, no, yeah, they're really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure Wes has never heard from an American like, "Oh, your accent
Yeah,
is so
sorry to be like
cool."
typical, but it look.
Honestly, it's sometimes it's the other way around. They're like,
Oh,
why
really?
is this Australian speaking about basketball? I'm like, yeah. Or they'll say like, why is this British guy? Why is this English guy speaking? I'm like, yeah, close, close.
Well, there are a lot of Denver centric fans and like media personalities on Twitter and YouTube who love hearing from you for sure because you do appreciate Jokic's game and you have tons of great videos on Jokic and so many of the accounts on Twitter and YouTube have been sharing them. So we love like, having you in the community, in the Nuggets community and like being a part of it, even though you are like have such an objective view and like give flowers to so many different players throughout the league and you know so much about the NBA as a whole. And you just said like you kind of just got interested in Jokic's play, but I am wondering like since you talked about like your Australian background and not growing up around the game as closely, that maybe you were a little more open to like receiving Jokic because sometimes he's not the typical looking basketball player. He doesn't play the typical style. Maybe like just you having that outside perspective allowed you to like appreciate it more quickly.
Yeah, maybe that could be for sure. Just his game as well. Initially, like he had so many highlights even in his first or second year. When obviously when you're at school, like you might just go through your phone at like lunch or just during class sometimes just watching highlights. So seeing Jokic just throwing behind the back passes as like a 19-year-old or 20-year-old as a center, it was definitely like eye popping. I don't know why some people say there are people that say he's boring to watch. I'll never understand that, but he's got the highlights. He's got the game when you actually watch it as well, where he's just doing everything. So that was definitely what drew me to him. Steph in the same way as well.
Yeah, I am curious though, just quickly before we go to the Olympics. Do you have any like stories in the upcoming season or just like teams that you have like a question that you're just interested in maybe being answered this season? Like whether it's a certain team putting a roster together or anything like that. You're just like, dang, I can't wait to see how this works out.
I think Grace talked about it before with the Pelicans.
Okay.
Because I'm a big fan of Zion. He's one of my favorite players. So
Nice.
I would say the Pelicans with Ingram, Zion, CJ. Because I think Trey Murphy's like I'd already have Trey Murphy starting over CJ.
Yeah.
Personally.
Right.
And Herb Jones. I don't know how they're going to fit all DeJounte. I don't understand it.
It's new
we'll see.
with DeJounte,
I know.
yeah.
So much guard talent. Even Zion's a guard effectively.
Right.
He plays as a forward, but he handles the ball, and that's where he's best. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Okay, so congratulations to the United States for doing what basically everyone expected to happen, but nobody wanted it to happen. Unless you're Kevin
Are you
Durant.
kidding me? There's so many
And
Americans who
winning
wanted
the
it.
gold.
Yeah, clearly.
No, I know, but there were also a lot of Americans that didn't want it because they had their own agendas. So they defeated France today in the final, and France then got the silver medal, and Serbia beat Germany in the bronze medal game. Wes, I wanted to know, did anything else about the final standings surprise you about this tournament?
I think honestly, the way Serbia started the tournament versus how they ended surprised me. Where they looked, the German coach said they were they were the best team they played. They didn't play the US. They said they were better than France. They started the tournament a little rocky. I was a bit worried if they were even going to medal. But the way they started flowing on offense, started running things through Jokic, which is normally a good idea. Avramovic was really great on both ends of the floor. Bogey getting back. I think he wasn't fully healthy to start the tournament. That might have surprised me just how good they got. Like their medaling wasn't a surprise, obviously, when you've got Jokic. But when they started the tournament, it was a little rocky. They looked a little shaky. So for them to level it up so much to the point where they could have come away with a gold if a few things go differently, that's probably what I'd say was the biggest surprise to me.
I wonder if there's any question now that Serbia is the second best team in the Olympics based on how it went. I mean, they didn't win the silver. It's just how the structure of the tournament works. They definitely, I guess, they put up a better fight just based on how the game went. USA was down in the semifinal against Serbia, and France was more competitive than I thought they'd be today. But yeah, against Australia specifically in the quarterfinal, Serbia was down by, what was it, 24? Was that the... Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. They were down 24 at some point in the second quarter, I believe.
So it was like you were saying, they were like close to maybe not even medaling, which would have been pretty bad. We talked last episode about, the chances of Serbia not getting a medal and you have Jokic on your team. When it was all said and done, Team Serbia really impressed and looked like a whole total team, and everyone contributed, and we'll talk about that. But I really liked following you during the Australia and Serbia game just because, you have connections all over the place with that game. You were like, I'm sad for my home country, but I still can enjoy Jokic to be happy for him. It's kind of funny that, that became a topic later on. But what were your thoughts about the Australia-Serbia game?
Well, there's no way you're from like Josh Giddey or Dyson Daniels. They didn't quite tweet me after the game. So that was good.
Yeah.
But I said it was, I think I said it's like, sure, there'll be 100 Australian teams that I'll get to watch. And I wasn't actively cheering for Serbia or actively cheering against, but you're only going to get to see Jokic in the prime of his career at the Olympics once. By the next Olympics, he'll be 33 or whatever. So he'll still be good, but it's pretty much a once off.
Yeah.
So I wasn't unhappy that they won. I'll just say that. I wasn't actively just rooting against Australia, but I wasn't devastated.
A lot of people were saying that similar sentiment of just like rooting for good basketball, but you do bring up a good point where when you have these generational players, and now these players are all over the world. It's not just Michael Jordan at the Olympics. Everyone wants to watch him. Granted, there was international players back then too. That was interesting to watch. The game was growing from a global standpoint with Michael Jordan and stuff. And now the game is big. I hope fans would understand that Jokic is a generational player too, and lots of different people are going to want to watch him. It's not just Serbians. You'd think people would get that. But
Yeah.
anyway.
I wanted to ask Wes what he thought Australia's biggest problem was, particularly in the second half of that game, or even it started in the second quarter, right? Because Serbia was able to cut the lead way down going into the half. Because the way that the game started off was exactly what I sort of predicted would be Serbia's issues trying to guard Australia's offense in particular. Like there was no defense being played. The transition game was just not there. So I was wondering, what did Serbia change?
I think it's the same thing that's been the problem for pretty much like the whole time I've watched Australia, is when Paddy Mills isn't absolutely on flames, which he was for the first half, and he has been pretty much his entire. His Olympic and World Cup numbers are just absurd. But we don't have that outside shot making. Josh Giddey's decent at getting to the basket and stuff. Dyson Daniels the same. They're all the same kind of players. Dante Exum. Josh Green didn't even play any minutes, I don't think. We had a guy called Jack McVeigh from the NBL who was knocking down some shots, but there's no real creation. That's where Joe Ingles used to be good. So that's where we've struggled. And that's where I'm wondering where we're actually going to get that from, because Paddy Mills will have to retire eventually. So I think once that dried up, that seemed to be what happened. And then Serbia just had that consistent offense with Jokic where they can always go back to that.
Yeah, Dellavedova was getting minutes over Josh Green in that game. I don't know. I don't know what you have to say about that.
I mean, Josh Green was bad
for your team, Wes. That's true.
Like I'm a fan of Josh Green, but I don't think he scored a point the whole tournament, which is absurd.
Really?
Yeah, or field goal.
It was an interesting game for sure, because I was literally watching it like, oh, okay, I guess Serbia is just like DOA, and now they're going to try to like slowly and methodically work their way back and try to make a comeback. I was really frustrated for the most part, but then like you said, they really caught their rhythm, particularly offensively, and we saw that in their semifinal game versus the United States, right? Will, how did you feel watching Serbia go up so big versus the United States? Because what happened in this game was basically the flip of what happened versus Australia, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was really excited, but I was trying not to celebrate too early. It's Team USA. I was just waiting for like what is going to be the story of this game to develop, where USA is going to get back in it. I knew they were. Steph was really frustrating me as someone who was pulling for Jokic, just because the 3-point shot is the shot that Serbia kind of had struggled with a little bit in this tournament. It wasn't like their calling card, so to say. They had it in them for sure, and when you play with Jokic, you're going to get good looks from there. So I'm like, oh well, they're killing it from three in this game. They're on fire, and then Steph was just matching them. So they got a big, they had won every quarter. They won the first 3 quarters, and then the fourth, they only scored 15 points. But, Steph was able to keep them in it, and the fourth, it just got away from them. And, man, they just needed a couple things to go their way. It just wasn't quite there. You were skeptical the whole time. You're like, I feel like USA is going to win this, just because, you are
Will
a
was
smart
literally
basketball
texting
fan.
me. He's like, oh my God. And I'm like, no, don't even talk to me right now. Like, I'm not,
feeling as well.
I will believe it when I see it, all of that. By the end of that game, despite everything that I was saying, I felt like that was Serbia's game to lose at the end, and that they gave it away. And there are specific criticisms that I have of how the rotations in the fourth quarter were handled, where Alexa Avramovic doesn't come in until there are 3 minutes left in the game and the lead is gone. Jokic, I think he played basically the entire fourth quarter, but it wasn't until, again, that 3-minute mark that he was playing at the 5, because Pesic insisted on playing Milutinov 7 minutes of the fourth quarter with Jokic, like next to Jokic. And it was a mess on both ends of the floor. And at that point, I was actually thinking, like, they have a big enough lead that if they can hang on here, like, I know US is going to make a run, but if they can hang on here and keep their flow going, they should be fine. But that double big look that I complained about the entire tournament just completely destroyed any chance that they would have had of hanging on to that lead. USA was like, we're gonna put LeBron on Jokic and then have like Embiid or AD roaming off of Milutinov, who like can't finish in the paint and whatever. I actually thought he was fine in that game when he was on the floor by himself at the 5 spot. everyone on the team was playing really hard. This is not a rant about, Jokic not having enough help, because like Will said, like a lot of guys stepped up really big, hit some big shots in that game. They were defending as well as they could, but I do think that the offensive spacing of the double big lineup and defensively what it meant for how Team USA was able to attack them down the stretch of that game just killed it and destroyed, any possibility of what would have been a major upset in this tournament.
Yeah, I'd agree on the double big. The problem with Milutinov was, well, Jokic's dump passes that he loves to do. When you have that roaming big, the way to counter it is if he can't shoot, you dump it off in the paint when the big comes over, which he made like 3 of those passes, and I don't think he converted on any of
He
them.
couldn't make a layup.
I know he couldn't catch or make the layup. Like if you're that big and if you're gonna be sacrificing the perimeter shooting, the perimeter defense, and making Jokic's job harder to score, you got to at least be able to finish layups. But that was frustrating.
There was one play in the fourth quarter, and there were a couple of these throughout the tournament whenever they went to this look, where, a lot of people pointed out, like, Jokic did miss all of his threes in that fourth quarter, but why is he out on the perimeter? Because Milutinov is clogging up the paint, and when he gets like a touch pass from Jokic, and Jokic relocates out to behind the arc, and Milutinov has like a semi-contested layup that he passes up in favor of kicking out to Jokic for 3. And I'm just like, what am I watching right now? There were also possessions where, USA is on a run. They call a timeout. They come out of the timeout. And what's the play? A Petrushev post up?
Yeah.
What are we doing, people? Like,
he was creating no ground.
Like, this team isn't serious. And it was like crazy because they just went away from what was working for most of that game.
Well, like USA has bigs, like elite big in spades. They have AD and Bam. Even if you are a pretty good finisher normally, like Milutinov, and you're a big guy. I mean, I saw all Olympics him kind of struggling and guys swiping at him in the post and like either turning it over or just not finishing straight up. Not to like, shit talk him, but
I'm gonna be honest, I was just surprised at any time he made a layup. Like, I was just shocked.
Yeah.
I never expected it to happen. And it's not shit talk. It's like specifically in those minutes when Jokic is on the floor too, because the paint is also clogged for him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so I thought it was just like
he did rebound
setting those guys.
That's
up.
like the one thing you got to do is rebound with that.
He got a few offensive
lineup.
rebounds.
Yes,
but he wasn't,
especially in the
full
first
time.
half of that game.
Yeah.
Because he was basically making up for the weird offensive spacing that was happening whenever the two guys were on the floor. But watching it the first half of that game and seeing, okay, they're still winning these minutes, but I saw how it was happening, and I'm like, this isn't going to hold. But yeah, I just felt like it wasn't putting those guys in the best position to succeed. But it was a valiant effort, really, from everybody. I thought Jokic was pretty good in that game, by Jokic standards. I don't think it was his strongest game, if I'm being honest, but it also wasn't his worst, even his worst of this tournament. Offensively. Defensively, he was doing a lot. He was blowing up a lot of Team USA's actions. We talked about their difficulty guarding Steph Curry, but for the most part, they were shutting down a lot of the other stuff that Team USA wanted to go to, right? But Steph was responsible for, 36 points in that game.
Steph was saying before that game, just like overall, the sentiment of the United States team was that, they have so many players, they never know who's going to go off and who's going to take control game to game. And it was kind of funny that Steph was almost in a slump, you could say.
No, he was for sure.
And then Embiid, we know the whole discourse around Embiid and his fit with Team USA. Both of them had like good games versus Serbia. And Steph, it reminds you of the old, or, the KD Warriors in a way where no lead safe. He can be that X factor where, he can put points on the board really fast with his shooting. And he was. And then Embiid was doing his face-up scoring and hitting mid-range jumpers. Unfortunately for Jokic and Serbia, because to kind of beat USA, like as good as you can play, you do need some luck and some help, and you need USA to be making some kind of mistakes or just not hitting the shots. You need some kind of variance or something.
I think there's always a feeling of inevitability when you're watching the US play. Like I did not at one point was I like, oh, they've got it in the bag. I was like, okay, they're going to come back. Who will close it out better?
Yeah,
that's kind of what my feeling was. The double big definitely didn't help. It was also some other people just started like coming along for the rides. In the first quarter, it was just Steph. That was the one thing. If Steph didn't go off like ballistic in the first quarter, that game's done. Because obviously they came back from 14 points, but They only scored 1 field goal outside of Steph in that first quarter.
Yeah, he
So
had
everyone else was struggling. So he just carried everyone. And then, at some point, KD is going to start hitting shots. He didn't do anything for 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, he had like 4 field goals. LeBron was kind of consistent, but turned it up in the second half. And Embiid started making shots. So it's like you've got 4 MVPs on the court at the same time. Steph was already hot, and the other 3 picked it up at the same time. Serbia could have definitely done things better, but when Embiid's facing single coverage and KD's facing single coverage, because you can't help off Steph, and you have to go under screens on LeBron because you don't have anyone in the paint or whatever that can stop him. It's hard to really contain them for an entire game. And Serbia stopped shooting well. I think they went 0 for 9 in the fourth quarter. They were 50%
Yeah.
from 3 for the first 3 quarters.
Exactly. Like they were playing the shot variance game, which is kind of what you have to do. You have to like pray for
100%.
some shooting luck when you're playing Team USA, and they leaned right into that for most of this game, and I thought that was the right strategy because they were at an overall talent disadvantage and it was working, except that they were allowing too many threes for Team USA. Like guarding Steph is tough. And you're not going to be able to stop him from taking. It's hard to run him off the line too, right? Because he's so good at that like pump fake and sidestep, pump fake and step back.
France
That even when you're trying to force him off of the third, off the 3-point line, like he's still going to get his attempts up. But I thought that there was, especially with the fact that they played them in exhibition play, they played them in group play, the game plan for Steph, whatever they were trying to do just never worked to get him out of his rhythm, because we talked about Steph being in a shooting slump, but he cooked Serbia in all 3 of those meetings, right?
Yeah.
Despite slumping versus all the other teams. And I think part of it is how it's like, I love Alexa, but that was not his matchup. And we talked about that. Like it's different. Alexa can study all the film that he wants, guarding Steph Curry on the court when you don't do it on a night-to-night basis or a regular basis, because he's not in the NBA. It's just a completely different kind of task. So Jokic did miss a lot of threes in that game versus Team USA in particular, but he's been missing threes all tournament. What are your thoughts about how important it is for Jokic to be able to take and make threes at a high level for his overall impact?
I would say 100% playoffs. Regular season, he could take no threes. I wouldn't be concerned. He'd still dominate. But in the playoffs, when the bigs become better consistently, you're playing against the best bigs every single time. That's how you get the advantage over the ADs or the Embiids. Obviously, he's not facing Embiid ever in the playoffs, but the ADs, the Bams, the Goberts, you take them out. And then it's not just hitting the shots, but it's the fact that then Jokic is underrated at putting the ball on the floor. So, but if they're just sagging off, obviously he can't put the ball on the floor and blow by them. So he gets that 3 and it just opens up the floor, opens up the pick and pop game. And it's a good kind of counter for when they're doubling him in the post. That's what we saw in game 7, where they just kept doubling him in the post. So he tried to like kind of get out to the 3-point line, pick and pop, and he just wasn't making any shots. So like obviously if he could, he'd take 100 layups a game, but at some point they're just going to send bodies to him. And if no one else is making shots, then he has to hit the threes. And so I think it's the playoffs. Regular season, I don't think it'll have any effect, although obviously he has to hit them to build that confidence throughout the year. But the playoffs is when and like you saw that in this game as well, where it's a playoff-like game. They needed him to hit a few of them. In fairness to him, like 3 of them were heaves that he just got thrown to, like end of the shot clock. But
I wanted to go back and check that, but I wasn't sure because he was 0 of 6 from 3 in that game.
All right. We don't have to make end of shot clock excuses for the jumper. It's looking pretty broke.
No, it is. I'll just give it a little. We'll push that down to like 50% field goal.
Yeah.
I do think that like in this game it was a little bit different because he was playing pretty dominantly and on the inside until he had to play in the double big look on the court, because that was the only time that he was spacing out to the 3-point line. There was one pick and pop 3 that he did attempt after Milutinov was off the floor and they were just trying to get back into the game. But I don't think that it's necessary to maximize his overall offensive impact. Like you said, yeah, if no one else is hitting shots, then he has to be able to. But then it's like, well, if no one else is hitting shots, then you're probably in a pretty dire situation. I do think that, like, if he could have hit a couple threes in that game, like, they would have won. But I'm also just wary of the times, especially that we saw last season, where he would get stubborn about the three and
Mm.
his shot's just not there that night. And he's just deciding to take 6 or 7 threes for no reason and then bricking everything at the expense of what could be better offense for him and for the others around him.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Wes. And I remember in the championship run, he did the pump fake a lot, where he,
Mm.
would, attack closeouts essentially because people were really worried about his three. And I think people are more used to that. Like they're not biting on the pump fake as much. And he is really good at putting the ball on the floor. But I do agree with you too, Grace. You're not alone in this. Like he can see, Jokic is never going to be a zero if he can't shoot a three. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like he's still like so impactful without it. But there is just something that's so backbreaking when Jokic hits a three because he's doing everything else and
Yes,
then he just
that's
hits the
true.
three and it's just so demoralizing. And if he
It's
hit
like an
one of those,
AG3, but like worse, but maybe
yeah,
not. I don't know. I don't know what's more backbreaking. We should ask the audience. What is more backbreaking, a Jokic 3 or an AG3? I think
uh,
AG3s are more backbreaking, to be
I'd say so.
honest.
From the
But
corner as well, it feels like it's just there's something about him hitting it from the corner where it's like
yeah,
it looks whack, where he's just kind of like
yeah.
it just goes in sometimes. I think it'd be more backbreaking, yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously Serbia won the bronze today, and we were all excited
yeah,
about that.
Wes, what did you think about, how Serbia was really able to shut them down today?
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised because even going back to the World Cup, which was just a year ago, they were the team that won it. Obviously, it's pretty much the same team. You still got the same NBA players, same role players. Yeah, it was. I think Franz Wagner was probably the most surprising that he struggled so much because they were not playing anyone that was physically equipped to stop him. There was no one 6'10" to guard Franz, so you thought he would have been able to
Yeah,
dominate. His brother actually was the one that was really the only guy who
yeah.
stepped up for Germany. Although you have to give credit to Serbia, they played really well. Yeah, their offensive execution was great pretty much the entire game. I think they were doing well there. And it was just that consistency. Whereas you had on the other side of the floor, they were relying on too many guys that aren't offensive threats. When Franz doesn't have it going, you were relying on Franz's jump shot. Bonga, who actually hit a couple of threes. The second German big, I forget his name.
Voigtman.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Voigtman, yeah.
Yeah, so they were relying on that a bit too much without the consistent flow of offense that Serbia had with those pick and rolls.
I
Yeah.
do think that you're right about the flow of Germany's offense seemed to just completely be cut off as
Mm.
long as you could bother Dennis Schroeder enough. And for as many struggles as Alexei Abramovich had guarding Steph Curry, he was really good at really just slowing Dennis down from getting inside the paint and then forcing Dennis to give up the ball and making somebody else kind of initiate the offense. And then from there, everything else just sort of fell apart.
I was thinking because you've compared
Germany's performance.
Abramovich to Jalen Suggs,
Yeah, that's right.
and I was like, he is kind of similar to Schroeder too, where
Mm-hmm.
his
Kind of
defense
a
may
pest.
his defense might be
Yeah.
a little better, or a lot better. I don't know where Schroeder's defense is these days, but he used to be like a bulldog, relentless, endless engine type of player, hustle player, where you love him when he's on your team and hate him when you have to play against him. They had what, like 6 players, I think, in double figures points wise on Serbia in that game today, which was really cool that it was just a total team win. Everyone kind of had a moment, like hitting a weak side three or finishing in the lane, or I mean, Jokic backed down Tice from the 3-point line. Like Tice just had nothing for him, like all
Played him off the
game.
floor.
Yeah.
Daniel Tice had never been more invisible on the floor than he was in this game, and he'd actually been pretty good for Germany
Yeah,
throughout.
man.
Like they just felt so deflated, right? Like most of the time, I tend to stay away from like the emotions based analysis of the
Mm.
game, but that's really how it felt watching this version of Team Germany. It felt like ever since, yeah, cutting off like Schroeder as the head of that snake had a much more outsized impact on the whole team than I expected. And Franz, he did struggle with his jump shot, and he basically had to be the number one option in this game because of how difficult Serbia was making it for Dennis. But if he never develops a consistent jump shot, where does he project as an
Mm.
offensive option? He's a really good like playmaker. I love the reads that he makes, and he's so crafty in the paint. But in terms of his scoring efficiency, at some point you just need to be better.
Yeah, I would say, well, he will have to get some kind of a jumper for him to be worth the 40 million or whatever he got paid. I think at the bare minimum,
Yeah,
he's
I think
still be a
that's
good
right.
player because he's so big, he's so good at getting to the rim, and that was an unusually bad game for him. Just like there was one point he had an open layup. I don't know if you guys missed it, and then
Yep.
missed like the putback, and it was just like
Yeah.
it's not his game today.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, that's why I was so surprised. I wasn't even worried about the 3-point shot from Serbia's perspective. I thought he'd just dominate the matchups because none of them were equipped to handle him physically. There's no one 6'10"
Yeah.
with foot speed on Serbia, or just in general, really. That's uncommon, which is why Franz is so good. I think the 3-point shot gives him a chance to be like ridiculously good if he can become a consistent shooter, which he was in his first 2 years. He was shooting like 35% on relatively low volume,
Right,
but
like
3.5
respectable.
attempts. Yeah, he was like, you
Right.
can't just leave him wide open. Like, so there was that. But for some reason, this past season, the playoffs, and now it's kind of similar to Jokic. It's just, although Jokic was decent during the regular season, he's just seemed to lose confidence, or because he had a bad air ball as well. I think his first shot was an air ball that was completely off. And you're like, damn, his 3-point shot's really just, he's not confident in it at the moment. He'll still be a good player regardless. Like we saw last year, he didn't shoot well and he still gave you like 20 and 5 a game. But the 3-point shot would elevate him to that.
And he does so
all-star.
many other good things on the floor too, right? I think Franz is an incredibly underrated defender, and his versatility is pretty underrated too. But one of the shots that I've been sort of bothered by the inconsistency of isn't one of his jumpers, it's actually his floater, because he's able to consistently get to that spot and that range and get really good looks from there. It's one of those shots where I'm like, that's going to be open to you. So if you can get good at that, it can actually go a long way to sort of making up for mid-range jumper and the 3-point shot being as broken as it is, because you're going to be able to use it as another way to attack certain types of mismatches as well.
Is there any final thoughts you want to say on Germany or Serbia?
I think maybe just a bit surprising how easily Germany got beat. Like I don't think they put up really a fight at all, considering how good they've been for over a year now in international basketball. I didn't see the France game because it was like at a crazy time, but I know they didn't play well in that game either. So it's just a bit surprising how they just kind of teetered out at the end. They played well against Greece. France was good against Greece as well in that game. So you're like, okay, this is just who he is. And then he struggled the last couple of games.
Someone was going to be left without a medal because there's only 3. And I was also surprised it was Germany. But the other team that missed out was Canada, obviously. And we had been talking about Canada throughout our Olympic coverage. Poor Jamal Murray in Canada.
Jamal Murray.
Went out in the quarterfinal versus France. I would say Jamal, that might be, I don't know if that was his worst game of the Olympics. I don't know where you guys would say, but
it depends on what you're evaluating in terms of like overall, his overall game. I think it was his worst game of the Olympics because he was like worse decision making, higher volume on the same bad efficiency or maybe worse efficiency. But he also started to move better than he had in any other game, which is what I was most concerned with as a fan of the team.
The intensity was up more because it's a single elimination. So there was a time to start picking up the intensity and movement. It was then. One of the only like silver linings we were taking from Jamal was the assists and like the assist turnover ratio, where it's like he had 5 assists, 0 turnovers. He's facilitating on the team at least. This one, he was probably his worst. I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but he had not many assists and more turnovers because he was dribbling a lot into the paint and trying to pass back out and then just throwing passes across the court that were just getting intercepted. I don't know if that's the defensive 3 seconds kind of thing where he's maybe used to bigs leaving the paint and then he's going in and just like even just trying to create rim pressure without Jokic. I'm not trying to say he's only maximized by Jokic. I believe in Jamal's skills just on any team, but it's definitely harder when you're not playing with elite bigs and rollers and things like that. And
he's not even good ones.
Yeah,
they don't need to be elite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because their front court was pretty lacking on Canada.
Yeah, I think I made a few tweets where I was saying the issue I've had with the Jamal Murray discourse is like you don't have to deny that he's been bad for the Timberwolves series and for Canada, but that's what a 12-game sample size. People are starting to rewrite what he was last regular season and just in general. He's been a good regular season player, pretty much his entire career. But because he doesn't average 25 a game, it's like, oh, he's a fraud. He's only good in the playoffs. It's like, no, the numbers are pretty much the same. He just has more
Yeah.
volume in the playoffs.
Right.
Like, he's still someone who takes pull-up jumpers. He's still someone who takes difficult shots in the regular season. It's not like he's just getting bunnies at the rim and then all of a sudden in the playoffs he turns into Superman. It's pretty much the same player on a bit more volume. And we've seen that for 3 years straight, even after the ACL injury. So I'm not concerned that like he's only had like a fluke playoff run. It'd be more of a shock if he fell off, because we've seen him be good for 3-4 years in the regular season and in the playoffs. It was the injury. Like he didn't look the same moving, particularly in the Timberwolves, and then I think he caught a bit of burst back for Canada, but he's the kind of guy where he's always going to believe in himself, which, works out a lot of times, but sometimes when he's not got it going, he's not going to change up his mentality is the thing. So that's what I think was annoying Canadian fans who haven't seen him play enough, where it's like, he'll take 15 shots even if he's not been shooting well the entire tournament, if they're there to take. And when it goes wrongly, it's rough, but I wouldn't have any major concerns unless the injury just becomes a thing. But over his play, he's not some Jokic makes his job easier. Obviously, that's fine, but he's still a good player, good playmaker, really good shooter. Not many players can shoot at the level he does. That's what gets overlooked. Like his pull-up shooting off those Jokic screens, you have to be able to shoot at pull-up jumpers, and he does that.
In the regular season, you have more time and more games to kind of go through slumps. So it's easy to see from the outside, you're slumping in the regular season. And obviously the playoffs is a heightened version where, he had a game where, this series where he was not making any shots. Then he ends up hitting the game winner at the end. Teammates told him to keep shooting. So, I mean, you make a really good point. I would bet more on Murray's baseline being there than not.
Yeah.
Like, it would just be weird for it to just disappear, and I kind of understand the circumstances.
I think it's also his play style as well. You have to consider he takes so many jump shots that he doesn't get to the line a ton, doesn't get to the rim a ton, which maybe you could say that is a problem. But when in the playoffs, it can be so good when he's just killing you with those jump shots. But obviously, there's more variance in that, so you will have those games, even stretches of games, where he struggles. But generally speaking, over an 82-game season, you've seen him be a consistent jump shooter. So why would that change? It just might be a bit more susceptible to variance than obviously Jokic's game or other players' games that live around the rim.
Yeah, Jamal really does have like the complete opposite kind of game, right? Where Jokic is this like metronome with like the highest of floors, because he takes, like you said, the most efficient shots, and Jamal takes like the least efficient shots. But when you consider the ceiling and what it can unlock for you in a playoff setting, it's, completely different. You guys were talking about how Jamal looked in the context of Team Canada. That particular game versus France, I thought was actually the game where there was the least variance between how Jamal was playing and how the rest of the team was playing, and he was playing the worst that he'd played. I just thought that Canada's offense was so clunky and so lacking in any kind of flow or specific direction. They would, come out with an ATO, and they actually like run like, say, a wide pin down for Shea, or for sometimes it was for Jamal, just to try to get something going. Or they'd come after a timeout and it would be Dylan Brooks ISO. Right? I'm just like, okay, I have no idea what the direction of this team is.
Maybe comes back to the center play, where you don't have that initial screen setter that's going to create you that separation. And then from there it kind of flows. You have the pick and roll options, you have the options to kick it out. And they have a lot of play finishes, but Shea and Jamal are the two guys that can consistently create. Jamal was struggling. Shea is a good playmaker, but he's not like an orchestrator of the offense, where you can just give him the ball and he's going to make everyone around him better. He's amazing, but that's not really his job. So you have the RJ Barretts and the Dylan Brookses and the Lou Dorts, streaky shooters. RJ's the most talented at getting to the rim of them. The other two are streaky at that as well. So it's like when you don't have that consistent form of offense outside of Shea pretty much just cooking, it becomes pretty clunky, particularly when they don't have consistent shooters either. So
Yeah.
I think that was most apparent.
Yeah, I agree. You were talking about Jamal like being a good passer. I thought he was actually just the best passer on Team Canada, and that was a
Yeah.
problem because he's coming off the bench. And I also thought Shea in particular, I'm watching him try to create his shot for himself, trying to initiate the offense for others. And he is not really a pick and roll guard. And I think that he relies a little bit too much on isolation to the point where he makes it a lot more difficult on himself
Mm.
than it necessarily needs to be. So I'm almost wondering if the addition of Hartenstein to that team is going to give him the opportunity to grow as a pick and roll creator in a way that could like spare him energy, make things easier for himself, make things easier on his teammates, just because it is like a good go-to option for just breaking down a defense when things start to stagnate.
Yeah, he hasn't had that point guard experience from that's not how he entered the league. I think he might have been point guard in Kentucky. I don't watch too much college basketball, but he started off as a two guard for the Clippers and then for OKC. So it's always been about he's been the play finisher. He's been the guy that has been focused on isolation scoring and just getting a bucket, which he does pretty much as good as anyone in the league. And he's slowly developed. I think in the Mavs series, he had some good playmaking. He limits his turnovers as well, which is good. Like, although he's not the best passer, he's not going to make any crazy decisions. So he's a lower ceiling, lower ceiling kind of guy on the playmaking end. But yeah, Hardenstein, it'll be interesting to see how well he develops as a pick and roll player because he hasn't had that. Chet's more of a guy that'll set the screens and like flare out to the 3-point line, or he's not going to set those hard screens like Hardenstein is. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes his game. If it adds another element to his game, then I don't think
Look
there's
out.
anything stopping him from being the best player in the league.
Imagine if
Exactly.
OKC like learned how to utilize Chet as a lob threat, which we
Yeah.
started to see toward the end of that Maverick series. That was one of the ways that they sort of
For
started
sure.
to break the way that Dallas wanted to guard them, right? Was moving Chet more to the dunker spot instead of like having the smaller guards there so that they had a legitimate lob threat, which made it more difficult for Lively or Gafford to help
Yeah.
on Shea's drives. Was there anything else, Will, that you wanted to say about Team Canada before we move on to our Olympic silver medalists?
I guess I feel bad for Canada. They have been really trying to put together a really good program. And
Oh, yeah. I guess they're trying to like build up
yeah, they're trying
basketball
to
in their
build up
country
their
or something.
international resume and presence, and they had NBA players on the roster. I was skeptical of
Yeah.
their roster. We talked about that on the show previously. I didn't think they'd make it to the semifinal, and they didn't. I didn't know it was going to
You
be.
recently didn't think that they'd make it to the semifinal.
Well, I said that before the Olympics started. I changed my mind because I wanted Jamal to see the video because Jamal was the talk of the town, and I'm like,
She
he's
was
so online, and I'm like, I'm not going to be on the wrong side of not picking Jamal
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. I didn't think they were going to be eliminated by France necessarily because I didn't
Yeah.
know who they were going to be facing in a quarterfinal to make it a reality that they didn't get to the semi.
Yeah, with France specifically as a team, I think that just to touch quickly on that particular matchup between France and Canada, France was able to weaponize a size advantage that they largely didn't have against most teams that they played. But yeah, versus Canada, they were really able to take advantage of that lack of size that Canada had on the interior. They, were dominant on the glass on both ends, and they made it difficult, especially defensively, for Canada to finish anything inside too, right? And France's defense overall is really what carried them through this tournament, right? We talked about Germany looking pretty deflated when they played France, and that was because after one half of play, the score was 33-33 all in that game versus Germany, right? Which is like, if you're looking for some 90s hoops, you should be watching Olympic basketball involving Team France. When we get to the gold medal game, the US offense is a different beast entirely. Every guy on that team, at least of the starters, and yeah, off the bench too, is someone who's used to having the ball in their hands, can put the ball on the floor, and can create. And the nice thing about how Team USA was able to come together as the tournament went on, as exhibition play went on, and start to really play to my eyes, a pretty aesthetically pleasing brand of team basketball, made it difficult to shut down both the individual brilliance of a LeBron James, of a Steph Curry, both on and off the ball, and also shut down what just the two of those guys are able to create for everybody else just by virtue of their gravity and their unselfishness.
I mean, you saw Steph getting doubled at like when you're on a call with LeBron and KD. It's like that's just if you have to double someone with those players around you, like you pretty much already lost at that point. I was really impressed with Yabusele, who was good
Yeah.
the whole tournament. He seems
Yeah.
like someone that not just dunking on LeBron, but he's cutting was really smart and effective off those when they were like kind of collapsing on Wemby. He made a few really smart cuts. I think there was one at the end of the half one where he cut to the right spot and had like a really clever finish.
That was a ridiculous finish, right?
Yeah, that was really, and the
that
cut as well was just
reverse
perfectly
layup
timed.
it was, off of some he was kind of acrobatic.
Yeah, the pass
The
from
way that
Wemby
he
was
went about
great
it
as
too.
well. But it was
Yeah.
So he's cutting, and I think he was knocking down some threes as well. I didn't see all of France throughout the tournament because the times sometimes are just weird because some of the games were like 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. So,
Yeah.
but I know he was good. Cordinier was good as well. There were a few guys on that team that you could see getting an NBA contract after this, is what I would say was probably the biggest takeaway. Yabusele, I can't imagine he doesn't get a contract at least for a 10-day.
Yeah, it's such a good showing from him. I was tweeting it all tournament. I'm like, this dude needs a contract. And then when he dunked on LeBron, I'm like, okay, someone's signing him.
He's getting a contract now.
Someone's going to sign this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope so. I think that he really demonstrated just he's like, I'm here. I'm going to be a hustle and utility guy. Sometimes I'll make shots. Sometimes I won't. But like you said, that really smart cutting, he was constantly looking to make sure that dunker spot was filled, which, creates that optimal spacing for a very flowing offense like France was, trying to attempt to do, just trying to establish some level of constant motion to kind of make up for their deficiency in sort of one-on-one scoring on that team. I will say though, Will, you were pretty down on how Wemby had been doing. He was actually pretty good in this game when I went back and checked the numbers. Efficient inside for the most part, although there were some kind of weird misses that have to do with just him not quite having as much strength in his base as he probably will continue to develop with his time in the league. There were a couple of lobs that were broken up, and I was like, oh, that probably should have been a dunk. You should have been able to not get kind of barely pushed off the spot there kind of things. But I was kind of surprised at how much he scored because it felt like he would have stretches where he just completely disappeared. I was just wondering what your idea is for what Wemby's next step is in his offensive development for him to start to fully actualize, the vision of him as an offensive number one. I'm not sure that right now the decisions that he makes on offense are the best. He's a good passer. He's got great court vision, but I don't know that his scoring decisions, like the shots that he decides to take, are necessarily number one option stuff quite yet.
Yeah, what are his go-tos? Sometimes he'll just pull up from three. He has the he has the ability to score from anywhere. That's kind of why he's so exciting. Just as an archetype and prospect, he's so unique. But I don't know if he's gonna become stronger as time goes on. People with that body type, like Kevin Durant and Chet, I just think they're gonna be infinitely lanky, and not buffed up. I guess Giannis buffed up pretty much, but if he can get stronger where he's not getting pushed off his spots or and on those lobs, throwing a lob to Wemby, you don't have to be accurate at all. And he can just grab it and dunk it. You have some leeway there with guards that you play with. And I think it's more scheme-based and team-based and getting comfortable with, the flow of whatever the offense is that's built around him to know what decisions to make.
When Jokic isn't touching the ball, he's setting screens. He's constantly involved. You see on any given possession how he impacted that possession. I think that there were large stretches throughout this game where he was not getting the ball, he was not involved in the given action, or once he did get the ball, it's just late clock, he's got to make something happen, or a few possessions has gone by and he doesn't get the ball. So then when he does, he's just I'm just going to take this fadeaway midi or whatever it is. But I do think that that is just something that I'm monitoring as the next step for his progress. And like, this is a really huge compliment to him, right? Because I don't think even the biggest Wemby proponents a year ago would have thought that he would have made the types and levels of skill leaps that he did just in the course of his rookie season, right?
I think it's the offenses. It's that thing where he can do so many things, but you
Yeah,
want that reliable. All of the best players have that reliable go-to. LeBron gets to the
that's
rim.
right.
He can do everything, of course, but gets to the rim. KD has that pull-up mid-range jumper. Jokic has that jump hook. Luka kind of he can do it all as well, but he kind of has that back down kind of fade away shot that he goes to a lot. It's yeah,
Steph.
Steph, yeah, any shot from pretty much just any
Steph's
shot.
go-tos
Yeah,
are the
yeah,
shots that get you benched if you're
yeah,
literally anyone
exactly.
else in
Step
any
back
other
over
context.
3 defenders. Yeah, that's a go-to shot for Steph. But Wemby, yeah, just what is going to be that go-to is we've seen a few hook shots. That would be an interesting kind of thing because he's got so much length. Like he doesn't even need to get the best post position or back down. Like if he just can get a stable kind of like position on that hook,
Mhm.
like just so much length there. Sometimes you can even see him laying it in from about 6 feet away.
Yeah. And that's going to be an open shot for him because he's going to
Mm,
be shooting over
over everyone.
whoever is
Yeah.
in front of him.
Yeah. It's like
So
KD. It's like KD's jumper, but in the post. Like no one
exactly.
can
That's
contest
why
it.
I'd be interested to see him do that more than develop. Like it'd be cool to see him develop a pull up jumper, but I'd be more focused on him getting that hook shot down and just
Yeah.
becoming a Kareem kind of a Jokic kind of guy.
Yeah.
And then if he can do the other stuff, that's cool. But like that feels the best high percentage route to go is to start inside the paint, work your way out. The three ball's nice when it's falling because I think you saw hit the first couple of threes, Embiid kind of rushed at him, put it on the floor, dunked it. It's like if he's going to be hitting threes and then he can blow by you. Like we've seen Jokic do it, but like Wemby's even a different monster when you have to close out on him because he's so agile and quick and it's 3 strides and he's to the
Yeah.
rim. So I think the 3 ball and getting that reliable form of offense in the paint would be where I'd want to see him start and just focus on, and the pull-up mid-ranges and all that. That's cool, but I don't know if it's even necessary for him to become the best player in the league. It'd be
I
like the icing on the top, but like I don't.
I guess my next question is just like, would we be impressed at all if Wemby dunked from the free throw line?
Has he already done it? Is the question. I think he
Yeah.
had
I
one
know,
against
right?
the
I'm just
Celtics where
thinking
it was
with
like close to it, like he held it out with Derek White was like near him, and it was just like he just kind of hung in the air, but he didn't even look like he was trying.
yeah, like when you talk about Wemby needing a go-to, I completely agree because to me, I say this all the time that efficiency is like 80% shot selection, but he doesn't know which shots to select yet. Like which are the ones that which are the ones you're best at, and maybe he's just not good enough at any one yet to stop, to cull the other ones out of his shot diet.
Yeah, I was just saying, it feels like he's kind of making it up on the fly when he gets the ball. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
whereas Jokic, is going to go
like
to
any
the
rookie, right?
yeah, exactly. It's
It's
just
like
there's so much attention on him, like that's why. But it's pretty normal for him to still kind of be figuring it out.
coaches may not know what exact messaging to get to him yet, and he doesn't know necessarily how to advocate for what he wants yet. So it's all part of the process, and
Yeah,
they'll be around in the next Olympics too. So
From this gold medal game, shout outs to Steph as usual, just that babyface assassin. Just he said night night on the entirety of France today, and there's nothing you could do about it. I mean, there were ridiculous shots, and if the IOC wouldn't take them down, we would, just insert some highlights of
yeah.
those
yeah,
ridiculous clutch time shots right here. But I mean, I don't know what else you can say about this guy. He's the greatest shooter ever, and it's not close. And I don't know that it will be close for a very, very, very long time because he's just such a ridiculous player. And again, if anyone else takes those shots, I'm benching them. I don't care if you make it or not.
Yeah, take him off. Yeah. What was
That's what
Embiid's stat line?
Steph shots felt like. I think he finished with like
How
4
many
points.
buckets?
Oh
I just
yeah,
saw
were any of
76
them
to
on
spend.
field
They're still
goals?
victory lapping. It's like, okay, he
Oh
didn't
my
even make a
gosh.
field goal in the gold medal match, but like, fair enough.
He only played 11 minutes in this
Yeah.
game also. And someone said that Jason Tatum also got some Make-A-Wish minutes as well. The politics of Team USA's rotations have been really, I think, fascinating to watch because you had people like Dave Portnoy coming out yesterday and saying that he was rooting for Team France really hard. He's a big Boston Celtics fan because, Jason Tatum was getting so horribly disrespected by receiving any DNPs from Steve Kerr on this team. And then, he comes out in the gold medal game and kind of lays an egg. He and Ant were the only players who lost their minutes in this game. Tatum in particular didn't really provide much of a spark, coming off the bench for his limited time. So that was just pretty rough. I don't know, Wes, do you have a take on that whole controversy of playing time and
I don't
rotation
know if
decisions?
I think Celtics fans have just made it something it's not. It's like
Yeah.
you've got KD is guaranteed to play, and he delivered pretty much every game. LeBron delivered every game. Those are two of the forwards. And then you had, I guess the difference is they had the likes of Booker and White and Holiday, and they had about 4 guards in the rotation. Sometimes they had 3 guards on at the same time, Steph as well and Ant. So that's where Tatum could have got the minutes, but at the same time, he wasn't knocking down jumpers. Booker was defending really well. You didn't need his size as much because there wasn't those. Tatum's so good because you can put him on anyone defensively, but there wasn't those 6'10" like Franz Wagner's where you want that Tatum kind of matchup. Booker was comfortable guarding most of the opposition team's best perimeter players at times when Holiday wasn't on the floor, and he was considerably better shooting the ball, playmaking, and everything than what Tatum did. So I don't know where the minutes were going to come from. I guess White maybe, but even towards the end, I don't think he played really at all in the last few games, did he?
Yeah, I think Derek White was limited the last couple of games as well. And Jason Tatum, like you're mentioning with all of the things that Booker was able to contribute, Jason Tatum was struggling in particular with his jump shot. I don't think he made a single jump shot through the Olympics or the exhibition games. I think that's the actual stat, which is really rough. So that shooting slump that he was in the playoffs has seemed to continue in through half the off season here. Maybe he just needs some time off.
Yeah, you can't expect him to. He's still in his championship hangover.
Yeah,
that's
come
true.
On, man.
Championship
the Nuggets
hangover.
had a hangover playoffs. So the Olympics was right after the.
Well,
finals.
the Team Germany had a championship hangover Olympics.
They did. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what actually happened.
Yeah, they sold out for the World Cup, which is fine. It's great, good for them. You have all this drama, and yet Tyrese Halliburton had an amazing tweet where he tweeted, the group project, the student who does absolutely nothing and still gets an A, and he's holding up the gold medal. He was like, it was the perfect end to all this drama where he's actually taking it in stride and having a good personality about it.
I think the difference is Tatum at this stage, because he's been around for so long. It's like they thought he would be at this point, going back to last year or whatever, it was seen as he was going to be almost the face of the team, but he just didn't deliver. He's still a great player. I think the narratives have gone too far either way, where it's like he needs minutes. Well, no, if he's not delivering.
Did Tatum play last summer?
No, he played in the Olympics 4 years ago. They probably would have won if he played, to be honest, because they needed a forward. They had 4 guards out there, like Austin Reeves and Jalen Brunson and Anthony Edwards. They
were playing Austin Reeves and Tyrese Halliburton together.
And Jalen Brunson sometimes.
No, I agree with that. And I think that Tatum in particular is just such an interesting story of a player to follow because of, this reputation that's been built up for him and the fact that he, has been this really good player that has, I think, earned the accolades that he has, but on this really good team, but hasn't necessarily lived up to, this top 5 player expectation that's been put on him, because everyone thinks naturally that's the next step, right? Kind of like what we're talking about with Wemby, how do we get him to the next, the next phase? And I think the fact that he's in such a big media market with very opinionated fans that do want to have a guy that they can go to war for. So they kind of maybe jumped the gun on it a little bit with Jason Tatum.
I think it was they were waiting on, because he was so good for so long, and it's once he wins the championship, that's now he's crowned, and he won the championship, but it's he was still good, but
Like
did it make you think he's
46%
better than
true
Luka
shooting in the
or
finals.
Jokic
It's
or
like,
even Shea? No, I wouldn't have said that.
right.
No.
You still thought of him as the same kind of player, which is still a top 10 player, but doesn't mean he's the best in the league just because he won the championship.
Speaking of what players think of our narratives, we have to talk about Kevin Durant again. So Kevin Durant had some very pointed replies the other night to various tweets having to do with the Team Serbia, Team USA game. One of them came from a friend of the show, SwipaCam.
Swipa was congratulating Serbia, and he said Serbia took the most talented team in the history of the planet to the wire with a medal on the line. Team USA was a 16-point favorite. The whole country should be proud. And then obviously Kevin Durant responded to that with, "Where are you from?" I don't know if he took some kind of issue with something with what Swipa said. If he assumed Swipa was being sarcastic about something, I don't know. Swipa was talking about it on plenty of shows today. He was on Locked On Nuggets talking about it. So you guys can go check his comments out about that.
So it didn't stop here, right? Kevin Durant was obviously getting like replies on his reply, including from yourself, with people saying like, what's wrong with him congratulating Serbia for, this, that, or the other. And it kind of spiraled from there, where he's quote tweeting people. I believe one of the tweets, actually, Wes, if you're okay with us pulling this one
Go
up.
ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Was a response to something that Wes said, where first, like, KD is kind of airing his general grievance about NBA fan culture and how we drum up narratives, where he says, let's talk about fan culture that's been created recently. A lot of huge egos who believe they are the reason for the advancement of a sport. A lot of idol worship, a lot of hate and division based off of wins and losses, a lot of disrespect of the work being put in by these athletes. My initial impression of KD's reaction to Swipa was that he clearly didn't get Swipa's actual intent. Like, maybe he thought he was being sarcastic or like being too, I don't know, in favor of Team Serbia by congratulating them for that game. And it's really funny. I tweeted this that night, that it's funny because Swipa does this constantly throughout the season. Swipa covers the Nuggets, right? But when we're playing another very talented team, including teams that have Kevin Durant on them, he's constantly giving legitimate praise to the other stars on that team, whether they won or lost the game, for the stuff that they're doing. And it annoys me. But I did find it odd that in that particular moment, KD perceived as a lack of patriotism from Americans that seem to be rooting for another team against Team USA, especially in the context of an American sports fan base and basketball fan base in particular that doesn't tend to care a ton about international competitions.
Yeah, I mean, because my initial tweet when I was responding to KD, like his tweet that he said wasn't, I didn't really disagree with, but I was more kind of talking about, because he'd gone on a bit of a tirade before saying like, we don't care who you Denver Lambs support, like Jokic isn't a god or whatever, and it's like, why he's got so much energy for Jokic. But my initial point was like, people have done this. I guess it's not international is the only difference, but they've done it for Steph Curry and LeBron and pitted KD against these guys for 15 years. Like, why has he all of a sudden got so much energy for people doing it for Jokic is why I was kind of confused. Because, like, you can't tell me that his mentions haven't been. We've seen it. His mentions have been blown up saying, like, you can't win without Steph. Like, LeBron's always better than you. Like, all of these things. But all of a sudden, when people start pushing this narrative that Jokic is the best in the world, he kind of seemed to get irritated by that. That was just my perspective. I guess can't speak for
You think that it's like Jokic is like on the tails of KD, of all the active players, like KD's maybe the closest one who's like,
maybe like he's pushing past you, like
Jokic's
KD.
like
Or it's
resume
like
is pushing up against. I think that's actually, I think that part is true. Just the fact of like, if you had to compare Jokic's like resume to any other active player, like KD is the next closest one. He is like kind of
he's not at
nipping on
Steph
his
or LeBron
heels.
level yet, but
And it's so funny that he's so preoccupied with trying to make sure that we know that our opinions and our takes don't matter. But he's constantly getting into these little kerfuffles with fans online. And they usually have to do with KD's place in these all-time debates, like, and where he ranks in the league even now. I can't remember if it was before or after that semifinal game. So he makes this comment when the question was about patriotism and playing for Team USA, just generally. And he says, a lot of bullshit happens in our country, but a lot of great things happen too. I think the fact that Kevin Durant made the comments well in advance of the Olympics about how he wanted to go into this competition and kind of dominate. I think that he's maybe bothered by the lack of discussion of like the specific styles of play in American basketball, or like maybe we find it a little too interesting and like exotic. The fact that like, oh, other countries play basketball slightly differently. And like, this is so fascinating and interesting that we sort of lose sight of the specific developments in the game that are American, that came from American players, right? Steph Curry completely revolutionized the game of any one player that has played over the last, say, 20, 30 years. Steph Curry has probably changed how basketball is played. I can imagine those types of examples sort of floating through KD's head when he's hearing all of this discussion, probably while he's at the games, but also obviously online as he's constantly lurking these different fan pages that are shit talking him. You can imagine all of those things swirling around in his head and him thinking like, well, wait a second, like there's a lot of good stuff that American basketball players have contributed to the game that just aren't appreciated as much. And I want our team to go out and show like how awesome we are.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'm not trying to like dismiss your point, but like he has a whole NBA season to have like American basketball be appreciated. And I know that, you know, international styles are entering the league, and there's a debate about if the classic NBA superstars are resentful of them, if they're accepting of the European players and players from other countries or not. I think there's nothing wrong with KD being proud of like an American brand of basketball and wanting people to appreciate it, but he's like like a kid who goes to college and they learn something for like 2 years and they think they're like in on this little secret knowledge that nobody else knows, and everyone else is like excluded, and it's like he thinks he has this esoteric view of basketball, which I get because he's an elite player. So when he was saying,
is college here the NBA?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have an immense knowledge about basketball more than any like person on earth. He always has this position of excluding fans and being like, I know what basketball really is and we know how to talk about it. The media doesn't know how to ask questions about it or understand it. The fans don't know how to talk about it or understand it, and only we know.
It's very gatekeepy.
And he doubled down on it again with all these comments. But he was going in on Nuggets fans specifically and like about Jokic and all that. And so like real quick before we go into other things, what was it about Swipa? Like do you think there was anything there with Swipa and like the Nuggets specifically?
I do, because I entered this Nuggets fandom in the last like year and a half, like within the last year and a half. And one of the things that I've been able to sort of observe as I was more on the outside of it was, you know, all of the discourse that was happening, particularly around the 2023 MVP debate. They basically like did what they did to Nuggets fans, what, you know, say outside forces did to people who wanted to support like Bernie Sanders. They called them Bernie bros, and they were like, oh, it's just all these like racist white guys that like don't want a woman to it. They've done to Nuggets fans, other fan bases basically say like, oh, all of the Nuggets fans are just like a bunch of racist white guys, and there are no black people that support Jokic or should or whatever. And I think that I'm a little bit sensitive to implications of that. And I don't know necessarily that like that's what KD meant in that moment. But I do think the fact that he responded specifically to Swipa, and it wasn't the only post that he replied on, but Swipa is obviously clearly black in his profile picture. And the post that he wrote congratulating Serbia was completely innocuous. So I do think that there was an aspect of it for KD where he was a little bit more sensitive to like, hey man, like you should be like with me here on my side of this, and you're not. So he took it in a way that was less innocuous than it actually was. And I do think that there is on some level wanting more respect and appreciation for Black American basketball players. And that is kind of where Katie is coming from when I say that, like, he wants those contributions to the game to be appreciated more than they might be in his eyes. Like, I'm talking about, like, from his perspective, he sees like all these like international styles, like you're talking about, being discussed more, and it shouldn't take away from obviously the achievements of American basketball and basketball in the NBA, but it seems to for him. And so there's like a little bit of like grievance aspect there. And I do think the fact that Swipa is Black, and like there's like this like weird like in grouping that, you know, you're either with us or against us, that sort of in my mind was being applied at a subconscious level. I couldn't separate out those factors when I was considering how Katie went about this particular way, especially when he went to talk specifically about like Nuggets fans and us being corny and like all of this stuff. Is like, it was hard for me to separate that out from all of the other discussions that I'd seen about like how, you know, racist all the white Nuggets fans are and that sort of thing. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well,
if
no,
you'd
I
like
just
to answer for your people.
No, I mean, I am happy that you can share that perspective, because I think a lot of people were speculating about that, and I don't know how Swipa sees it. I don't know how other people saw it.
Right.
I think it's fair to speculate about it and share his perspective, and I think Katie's also fair to like feel that way. It makes sense, but I just think a lot of people were pointing to.
Right, but he doesn't have to be a dick about it.
Sure. Unless you're in the Nuggets fandom, you don't really understand why the Nuggets fans were still rooting for Jokic.
I guess there's also the possibility that it was like all in good fun, KD. Like you don't know. A lot of the times, though, he comes on social media, it's pretty malicious, which in fairness, he gets a lot of hate. So I can understand why. It's just,
Sure.
but you don't know if he was just kind of.
This wasn't in reference to him, though. Like, it wasn't really talking about him directly at all.
Exactly. That's why it was
in particular.
kind of strange. It was out of left field. Like, Swipa didn't.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, oh, these USA guys, like, look, they're frauds. They're lucky they got away or whatever. It was literally just complimenting Serbia for playing a good game against a formidable opponent, which in the tweet, he kind of also suggested how good USA is. Like, the idea that you can look, it's like that double-edged sword where it's, sure, you're complimenting the team that lost, but you're also complimenting the team that won because they're so good.
Because why else compliment the team that lost?
Exactly. They're so good that just coming
good.
close to beating them is like an impressive feat. Like, that's how good USA are. That, like, it's a big deal just to even come close to beating them.
Yeah.
That's the level they're seen at. So, like, I guess it could be frustrating when you're consistently winning and people are like, well, look at this team that came close to beating you, or international basketball's catching up and all this. But at the same time, it's kind of a compliment to USA. Well, it is a compliment to the USA that they're still seen as, if you can come close to beating them, like, that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
So I think there's two ways to take it, and Kevin Durant maybe took it the negative way.
He decided to take it the negative way.
Yeah.
Well, it's like,
I mean, that's kind of like what he's done.
There's no reason that we should assume that he was like completely sober when he's like answering tweets at 5 a.m. or whatever while he's hanging out in Paris
or whatever. Like,
right.
But I mean, he said before, we already went over this, how he wanted Team USA to beat teams by 50 and 40 and all that. So if someone's saying you guys are this good, he shouldn't take it as like trying to discredit them, like it was unfair, because he's used to the whole like, you have a super team, it's not fair, especially with the Warriors.
True.
But that's what he wanted too. He wanted to be that dominant, and so. But I mean, just my thing was, because I was dealing with backlash of anyone rooting for another team that's not the United States if you live in the United States, and some people just can't like wrap their brain around how anyone could do that. I think that's like incredibly silly, and I don't understand how people don't realize how you can be fans of all different athletes and teams around the world. I mean, we have Wes here as a great example. Grew up in Australia, fan of many American players. You would have been happy if Australia won. You would have been happy if Serbia won. You know, sometimes that's just how it is. And that's how a lot of Nuggets fans were. Not that we were hating the U.S. and wanting them to lose. We weren't like really trying to take away from what they were doing. We just would rather have seen Jokic and Serbia win. And we have so many connections with Serbian people. They've come on the show. We've gone on their show. So we have special like social ties. So unless you're in the community, maybe you don't understand that. I like your point about how maybe it was all in good fun, because that's kind of what I was doing. And just to like briefly summarize, if I can, the reason why he quote tweeted me was
Oh God.
I thought that it was a bad look for Katie to respond to Swipa, just like we've been talking about. I said it was a scumbag move, which I wasn't thinking that like specifically about the word scumbag. People said that was too harsh. And so I don't like being told that I can't like criticize people on Twitter. I can root for whoever I want. There are people saying I couldn't root for Serbia. Can't be harsh to NBA players. So I was trying to take it to the next level by kind of doing a joke by upping the ante, if you will, and
You
being like,
really did. You did
so I
up
was
the
like, okay,
ante.
if I can't say scumbag, then I'm gonna say petty, I'm gonna say insecure, I'm gonna say ignorant, I'm gonna say literally all of it, just because I can. Because who cares? This is Twitter. Like, this is part of the culture. Did I
And when
take
you
it too
think
far?
about it,
Maybe. I'm not gonna say that stuff to Kevin Durant's face. I don't actually like dislike him that much. And he still found that tweet. I didn't even tag him in it. I didn't respond to him directly saying that. I quoted one of my own tweets and he found it. And it kind of blew up, and it was all in good fun. And that's how it went down. And so it's kind of funny we had you on the show because we interacted with him. Both of us interacted with him. So it was a good time.
and when you think about it, upping the ante like that and becoming even more petty is maybe the most American thing you could do in that situation.
Yeah, it
So,
was. Yeah, I'm usually like,
USA.
I mean, it's funny too because I really do have like a very calm personality, and he quoted me saying Will's upset, which I've never been upset on Twitter.
Oh, I thought you were
Uh
gonna say you've never been upset. I'm like,
no, I say everything with like such a relaxed personality, and people take it wherever they want. You know how it is. People miscommunicate on Twitter. It's a whole thing. So it was kind of all unfortunate, and I think there were legitimate things KD said that Nuggets fans could kind of be upset about, and also his own fans could be upset about, because he's saying fans' opinions don't matter. That includes his own fans, and fans are what run the league. We watch it.
well, we don't run the league. We
Well, the
just
league wouldn't
finance
exist
it.
if no one was watching it. So
Well, I don't know. There's money laundering schemes out there.
anyway,
We can move on.
let's
Let's
move
get to
on.
our final segment. We wanted to just put a little bow on the Olympics and just talk about some of the standout performances, for better or worse, in the tournament, and just ask whether they were real or fake. And that just means, like, is it going to translate to the NBA? And so the poster boy for doing stunningly well in the in FIBA, but struggling to, various degrees depending on the time of the season, in the NBA is Josh Giddey. So, Wes, we have to ask you about your countryman Josh Giddey and whether you think that his FIBA performance from particularly this summer is going to translate over to the NBA. That is his aggression, his efficiency.
I'm not sure if any of the question marks about his game were answered. Maybe some of the things that people were suggesting that he's the worst player ever, like, okay, that's a bit overreactionary, but I think at the base of his game, he's good at being a creator and a scorer. It's just how does he fit into a team that has those guys that are just better, if you know what I mean? Like on Australia, we don't have Shea Gilgeous-Alexander or Jalen Williams that take the ball out of his hands that are more efficient scorers. I'm sure if he went to Chicago, if he went to any NBA team and was the number one option, I wouldn't have too many concerns over it. He could put up 18, 8, and 8. But in the NBA, that's not enough. You need to have complementary pieces. You need to be able to work off the ball. You need to be able to shoot. You need to be able to do so many things, defend. It's this weird thing where he can do like quite a lot of things decently, but how does he fit into a more winning environment? That's where it's hard to grasp his fit. What is he going to do complementarily as a complementary piece to help these other teams? He'll go to Chicago. I'm sure he'll put up pretty good numbers and people will be like, wow, he's not terrible because he's not a terrible player. But how will that fit in when those other guys around him develop? And then all of a sudden he's tasked with not controlling the ball, not doing what he wants to do, if you know what I mean. He's an okay player, but it's just where does he fit? How does he fit?
Yeah. There's tons of players like that in the league when they go to the right place and then it like fits perfect and everyone's like, "Damn, I'm so happy for him." I don't think the Bulls is going to be that.
Why do you say that? Just
because I think they don't have like the whole vision yet for the roster. I mean, I could be wrong. You know, it was different when it's like you have an Aaron Gordon who wasn't really working in Orlando, and then he comes. I know like these are different players, but comes to Denver and is able to like translate areas of his game to fit that roster. And I just think the whole like overall archetype's not formed
That's
yet.
almost like my point though, because I think Aaron Gordon has those distinct skills that are useful if in the right environment where he's so athletic, good defender, good lob threat and all those things, where Giddey doesn't have that. He's playmaking, but even as a playmaker, you need the ball in your hands. Where it's like he can do a lot of things decently well, where in Chicago, like he'll probably have that license.
Mhm.
I'm more concerned about if you sent him to a good team, like when he was on OKC.
Right.
What does he do when the ball isn't in his hands?
Yeah.
So I think I don't have too many concerns. I think he'll put up decent numbers in Chicago. Maybe not. I don't know. It depends on his role.
Yeah.
But like, is that going to lead to anything? There are countless guys in the NBA. If you gave the ball to, they'd be able to put up good numbers. But that's not enough. Like you need to be able to have those skills that will work on a winning team.
Yeah, I think he's gonna have good numbers too. Like, I think like he'll have to go to another like contending team if he can like shape his game in Chicago. Like the next team would be like where it might pay off, unless the Bulls like do some moves. But yeah, no, I agree.
You're talking about the Bulls doing moves.
Yeah,
I guess Josh Giddey was like the move, right?
Yeah.
So the next player I have on the list is actually his teammate Dyson Daniels, and you've talked about Josh Giddey not having necessarily the athletic tools to know like how he's going to be this complementary piece. I have felt that Dyson Daniels, he's a great defender and he can be this like really adept playmaker on the ball, just as good court vision, things like that. But his like scoring aggression was always a big question mark for me. With Team Australia, he was almost exclusively a play finisher, right? And I actually thought that he really improved with his aggression in that role, just like knowing like, oh, I have to shoot here, or I need to drive here, or like I need to be the one to score the ball once that advantage has been created for me. Do you think that is going, like, was that real or fake? Is that going to translate into the season next year on the Atlanta Hawks, right? Where he's going to be on a team that has a really high level creator next to him.
Yeah, I think these guys are such interesting like case studies because Giddey can do more things, but I'd probably prefer Dyson Daniels on my team going forward because I know he's going to be a great defender.
Yeah.
The 3-point shot is the question mark, but to be honest, it looked really good for Australia. He still hesitates a bit, but he can shoot it. And that playmaking, although he's not going to run an offense, if you give him the ball, like even if he sets a screen and then you give him the ball out of the short roll and he can find players, whereas he's got so many complementary skills, I can see him really being an impactful piece. How good he'll be, I think, will depend on how confident he becomes because he does have the skill set to be more of a scorer. Like he can handle the ball. He's got like floaters. He can pass, but just he hesitates a lot. He picks the ball up. He just stops sometimes with that, where the confidence is at. But I think there were enough to see from what he did for Australia that for Atlanta, for a team that already has Trey that will have the ball in his hands so much and create, if he just starts off being that spot up shooter, being a great defender, and then slowly implements other parts of his game as he gets more confidence, which is never a guarantee, but at least he can keep himself on the floor is what I'm saying. Like if he can do those two things really well, which he did for Australia, he was knocking down threes consistently and not like pretty decent, like catch and shoot threes as well. And his defense, I don't think has ever been questioned. Like he was already close to like an elite guard defender pretty much once he got into the NBA. Like he's that good. So I have high hopes for him, to be honest.
I think I agree about Dyson. I really didn't have questions about the defense. It was more like working in an off-ball role on offense. How is that going to work out when he was so hesitant whenever he was put into a scoring situation, even with an advantage created, right? And on the Pelicans, to be fair, it wasn't often that solid advantages were being created for him on a consistent basis. And maybe that is going to change a little bit more, like just mindset wise, knowing that you're going to have the defender will be caught off guard or you will be wide open, like for sure, as opposed to sort of the defense having time to reset because the Pelicans were in a very strange situation when it came to their playmaking on that team. My next question is about Jamal Murray. He really struggled, particularly in an off-ball role. A lot of people were giving him a pass on his overall Olympic performance, saying this is his role with Team Canada. He's not used to it. It wasn't like, totally consistent with coming off the bench and minutes and whatever. Like, is he on the ball? Is he off the ball? He has to share the floor with all these other creators. But if we want to run with that sort of explanation for his struggles in the Olympics, one of the things that I would be concerned about as a Nuggets fan is, does this mean that he's just not going to be able to play off the ball anymore next to somebody like Russell Westbrook, for example? So were Jamal's struggles with making himself consistently a threat off the ball something that is going to hinder the Nuggets' ability to find lineups that work when he and Russ are both on the floor, if Russ has to play on the ball?
I just think it depends on his shot, because the shot was really bad. And I was more confident in his off ball role because I was just like, he's a good shooter. And like, he used to be a really good catch and shoot shooter too. Like, he had good catch and shoot numbers, and he hadn't been doing that as much with the Nuggets because has the ball in his hands more and he's going to the step back or whatever. So I was excited to see it. I'm disappointed that the off-ball role didn't translate more like I thought. But I think if he's like on and the rotations are right, because he was coming off the bench, he's starting the game, and let's say he's staggering and he gets a little bit of time with Russ, and Russ is a really good passer, I could see like it still working out and Jamal hitting some threes. So I'm still like hopeful. I'm not all the way out on it right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say it's a different play style as well. Russ has to say Shea, who's running the offense. Russ will really like try to collapse, although he doesn't collapse the defense as much as he used to, obviously, but he'll be that run and gun kind of guy. He'll try to get in the paint, try to kick it out. And I think it'll be in small doses anyway. I don't expect Jamal and Russ to be on the floor too much together, unless Russ just plays so well that you can't keep him off it. Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see. It's kind of a thing where you haven't seen Jamal Murray with that other guard for like when Monte Morris, they played a few minutes together, but like not very regularly. And obviously he's not a Russ kind of player. Monte played off ball a fair bit as well because he could space. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not exactly sure what to expect, but like Will said, I don't think I'd be all out on Jamal. Like if his shooting goes, obviously that's a bigger concern, but he's been a consistently great shooter, to be honest, when you consider the volume and the types of shots he takes to like at least warrant being a solid guy in that role. Maybe he's not maximized to the most, but I don't think he'll be a liability.
No, I agree. I think that I think it does depend on his shot, especially on a team that is, not exactly rich on shooting, especially off-ball shooting. So if you're trying to construct lineups that are going to work for Russell Westbrook, ideally you're not foreclosing upon another option that includes one of the better shooters on the team. So yeah, I also hope that it's fake. Okay, so I'm going to skip down to our last player here, one that both of you were very impressed with in these Olympics. That's Guershon Yabusele, who was the do-it-all guy for Team France, right? Playing power forward. He was attacking mismatches. He was rebounding. He was playmaking some, cutting off ball, all of the things. Real or fake? And I guess I would just follow that up with, why didn't he work out in the NBA the first time? Because he had, what was it, like a 10-day contract?
He was on the Celtics, I think. He was a very bit part player. Like he didn't play much at all.
Well, I'm just glad Joel Embiid did not choose to play for France, because it was more opportunity for Yabusele to play. And I was impressed by him. I'm going to say it's real, and he's coming to the NBA, and he's a good hustle player, and he's athletic around the rim. Some teams are looking for that athleticism, and he could fill some holes on some teams.
It reminds me of like a Jason Tate kind of player where it has that defensive versatility, like the strength. And although he's not the tallest, that's kind of the question mark. Like, how will that translate at the NBA level? It worked against USA, which is always the best test you can have because they got a ton of bigs.
But all NBA players, right?
Yeah, exactly. How will that dunker spot ability translate when it's not? Like Aaron Gordon is a great example where he's 6'10".
Right.
You can throw it above the rim, where he was more operating. He was dunking, but like it was more using craft and his size rather than like just raw athleticism.
Yeah.
So how will that translate in that role?
Right.
It's interesting. I think he definitely has earned at least a chance at the NBA from this, where he has enough complementary skills. You could see it working. The 3-point shot is obviously, like a lot of players, that'll be a big thing as well.
He like had a fake handoff or he rejected a screen or something on that LeBron dunk. And so it was like, yeah.
I was just going to say, I was really impressed with him. So I was just kind of thinking about like, there are multiple players that are like in the NBA right now on rosters, like that have standard deals, whatever, that I'm like, I feel like he could like fill in, right? Like, what was his name? KJ Martin was like on an NBA team last year. He does have a little bit more of that like bouncy athleticism, but in terms of just like kind of Swiss Army knife player who can like do a little bit of everything and like has some size and can do some of that like cleanup work, that garbage man type work, because he actually made a second team All Olympics. I didn't realize that they were, assigning these types of teams, but they did, and he made it along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think Giannis made the second team along with Bogdan Bogdanovic as well. Obviously, the stars, the main five guys, including Dennis Schroeder, Jokic, Steph, LeBron, were on the all-stars. They didn't call it first team, but they had like all-stars and then second team. So I wanted to ask about Yabusele. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our show. Wes, thank you so much for sitting with us, bearing with us. Just tell the people where they can find you and your very fun videos.
Yeah, sure. Just 6man on YouTube. Normally, I'm trying to make videos 5 to 6 times a week. So,
oh my gosh,
you're a workhorse. Oh my God.
I'm going away in a few weeks, so I'm trying to get out as many different videos as possible because I kind of want to talk about every team, every player as much as possible. So
I know. Well, good luck. With like the IOC stuff, because
no Olympics clips that
they've been taking down everything.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks, man. It was awesome.
Thank you. It was good.
Yeah, we really appreciated it. And to the audience, please remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and leave us a review. We're on all the audio platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. Share us with your friends, share us with your family, share us with your enemies, share us with your family's enemies. Follow us on Instagram now. We're posting shorts on TikTok and reels on Instagram as well, at What's in a Game NBA. We also have a new clips channel on YouTube for people that just like those quick hits. It's at What's in a Game NBA Clips on YouTube. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.